Hello and welcome to another episode of Ain't It Scary with Sean and Carrie, brought to you by Killer Podcasts and Evergreen Podcasts Network. I'm the titular Sean.
And I'm the very titular Carrie.
It's the show that takes you inside the unbelievable, the unexplainable, the macabre, and the bizarre and tries to find an answer. How have we been doing on that lately, finding answers, Carrie?
Well, let's see. We've been doing a good amount of crime lately.
Last week's the murder that took place in
Seems
Amityville
pretty
had a
clear.
pretty clear answer.
I don't think we needed to be brought in for our expertise on finding that answer.
You don't think we cracked the case on Ron DeFeo Jr.?
No, there are some episodes where I'm like, I think we solved this case.
We did it.
But this is not one of them. I think it was pretty clear what happened.
Yeah, well, he told the police what had happened. Mm-hmm. He's just claimed ever since that it was a demon that made him do it. Mm-hmm. So, this week, we are following up last week's, as we just referenced, Amityville episode where we covered the brutal murder of the DeFeo family in the house at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York.
It's a house on Ocean Avenue.
There's a murder on Ocean Avenue.
As a former emo kid turned emo adult, I will never not think that.
No, of course. I think the little electric violin riff plays in my head every time I read the name. Yeah.
That's like pop punk, right? This is Yellow Card for all of our Gen Z fans.
We're referencing, I'm going to say, a 2004 hit by the band Yellow Card.
Yellow Card.
Their first and only. Ocean Avenue. This week, we're following up that Amityville story with the more famous Amityville story. This is, I think I mentioned last week, Carrie, what happened to the DeFeo family is the real Amityville horror because it's the only...
Well, to you, yes.
It is the thing that actually, happened.
Always the skeptic.
Yeah, that's my job on this podcast. But this week, we are going to cover the subsequent haunting that plagued the Lutz family, who moved into the house on Ocean Avenue after the DeFeos checked out early.
Oh, boy.
I said that thinking it was clever, but you don't check in or out of houses usually.
It's not an Airbnb.
Well, anyway, after they all were horribly shot in their sleep.
Oh, yeah. And so the Lutzes move in, and it's a beautiful home. Let's not forget that. It's a really large, lovely house.
Yeah, look up pictures. If you type
its own boathouse, which is wild.
If you type in the Amityville horror, you might get some pictures of the book cover of Jay Anson's 1977 book based on this haunting, which has some creepy flies on the cover. It's a good cover. It's a better cover than it is a book, but we'll get more into that in a minute.
Wow.
You'll see some posters for the various, again, dozens of feature films that have been made using the Amityville name. But
it can't be all in the same house.
No, they're not all of them are even set in Amityville.
I was going to say, are they all even in Long Island?
No. No. They just use the name. Most of the movies with the Amityville name in there are really just cashing in on the name, and there's no connection to the original story. But there was a series of about 4 or 5 original films that 4, I think, original films that I'll say stretch and build upon the story told by the Lutzes in this book.
There was also the remake with Ryan Reynolds as Mr. Lutz, looking real sweaty a lot.
That is true. I haven't seen that Amityville horror remake, but it was the subject of a lawsuit that we'll get to later in this episode.
Oh, my.
So, as we're referencing, the primary source of the Amityville horror legend is, appropriately, the book The Amityville Horror, written by Jay Anson and published September 1977. It's estimated the book has sold about 10 million copies. Certainly qualifies as a bestseller, and as I mentioned, it has spawned dozens of feature films and dozens of books and yada, yada, yada. Many documentaries.
I mean, this book hit at the perfect time. It's post The Exorcist, which, don't forget, was a very, very popular novel first.
And after Rosemary's Baby, too, right?
Definitely after that, after The Omen. So this kind of weird 70s period, everyone's just really scared about
Satan,
the devil. Like we didn't have, the Cold War or whatever to think about Vietnam. But, metaphors in horror.
Have we talked on the podcast before about how our generation maybe finds it harder than our parents' generation to be frightened of The Exorcist because because they literally believed in the devil?
I think we've mentioned that on our Cursed Films episode, because we did talk about both The Exorcist and The Omen.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's definitely a thing. And I've known people who were religious, who are my age, and find The Exorcist to be the scariest thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to have that sort of basis and belief.
Well, and not just,
it's gruesome and it can be frightening, but I think to really feel like, oh, Satan's going to come after me after I watch it, you have to have a basis of belief.
Well, yeah, and there's a difference, too, between being a Christian and believing in God and the devil, Satan, kind of in theory, versus believing that they're concrete, that Satan certainly is a concrete force that can act on our world in a physical way.
Yeah, this is a time of a lot of religious horror, and also, there's this kind of haunted house horror going on, and I think it speaks to a lot of the issues that are going on at the time. We're afraid of other people very much at this point, and we're also afraid of kind of the evils in ourselves. This is the time of serial killers really coming to the forefront. And so possession and a haunted house, it's kind of very handily taking those themes and making them scary, but in a way where it's like, well, it's not, me, or it's not this guy that might kill me. It's a ghost. So it removes you a little bit. And I think that's probably why Amityville Horror hit so perfectly at this time. It's after these established titles in horror have already come out.
Well, and it's marketed explicitly as being, a tale as terrifying as The Exorcist or Rosemary's Baby.
Well, everything was.
But it's true. But it's real, you know, but it's true.
Well, that was the real twist, wasn't it?
The first movie, The Amityville Horror, was made in 1979, followed up by a sequel called Amityville 2, The Possession, in 1982.
Possessed harder.
I think that one's actually a prequel that dramatizes the murders of the DeFeo family as being caused by whatever demonic force caused the later haunting. They change all the family's names in these movies.
That's for the best, I guess.
Amityville 3D. In 1983, when everything...
The flies will come at you.
And then Amityville 4, The Evil Escapes, rounds out the original series.
Oh, so that's how we get to like Amityville 12, Indiana, for some reason.
No, because most of these other ones are not connected in any way to the creators of the original film, to the Lutz family, to the story. It's just you can't trademark the name Amityville, which is an actual town in New York, so you get things like, in 1996... Amityville Dollhouse.
Oh, it's a very small haunted house.
And then in 2015, the Amityville Playhouse.
Oh, they're putting on a nice community production of The Music Man, and they're possessed.
And then some clearly unconnected to the original story titles like Amityville Prison, the Amityville Harvest, and my personal favorite, Witches of Amityville Academy.
I'm sure that's your personal favorite.
It's kind of a Harry Potter.
Did you enter
twist.
that into a specific search earlier?
I tried to, but it auto-filled.
As what?
Anyway. The dust jacket blurb for this original book begins... On December 18th, 1975, a young family of 5 moved into their new home, complete with finished basement, swimming pool, and boathouse.
Oh, they're really throwing that finished basement in.
It's a luxury feature.
Complete with this finished basement.
And a boathouse. 28 days later, they fled in terror, leaving most of their belongings behind. The fantastic story of their experiences was widely publicized on network television, newspapers, and national magazines. But the Lutz family never disclosed the full details to the media. Now, their own carefully reconstructed memories and independent interviews with local clergy and police reveal their entire harrowing story.
I mean, I'm in. If that comes out now, I mean, it would be much more scrutinized, but I'm in.
Yeah, well, some scrutiny
They left a finished basement? Like, they must have been scared.
I know.
In this economy?
Yeah, really.
In that economy, too.
I love that we're still focusing on the finished basement and not the pool or the boathouse.
Because it leads with it.
Yeah, it sure
It's
does.
very John Mulaney, new in town. I'm gay. I have AIDS. I'm new in town. It's like the finished basement doesn't seem to fit. The pool and the boathouse is pretty swank.
Yeah, you got to put it in the middle. You have to bury it between pool and boathouse. Maybe the boathouse, these were all selling features, certainly, when the Lutzes first bought 112 Ocean Avenue for $80,000
Holy shit.
in December of 1975.
Do you have any idea what that is now?
Yes, it's $421,000 in today money. So,
Wow.
here in Fairfield County right now, you
That's a steal.
that's a steal. Absolutely.
That's crazy.
But
you have two separate places to swim.
You mean because of the boathouse and the
Well, because you're
on the water?
on the water and you have a pool. It just feels very luxurious to me.
Well, you remember when we were going down the waterway in Fort Lauderdale? There's all those houses have swimming pools that are on the canal.
Yeah.
The Lutzes moved in December 18th. They knew about the killings at the time, but decided it was no big deal, and it had lowered the price to almost within their price range. They had been trying to spend no more than $50,000 on their, kind of step-up house.
I'm so prepared to move into a murder house today.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's a selling feature for you. Yeah,
Well,
it's very different.
I'm not afraid of it as most people would be.
Just like a cemetery on or abutting the property isn't a selling point for most people, but for my wife.
I will say that we have talked about this, and whenever we do go to a real estate person to try and find a house, I have said, I will tell them we're pro cemetery.
We're a pro cemetery
I know
family.
I know that some people will not like to buy houses right next to a cemetery. We have no problem with it.
Is that a shirt? We're a pro cemetery family?
It is now. It could mean a wide variety of things.
No, we just put our cartoon faces on it, and we're a pro cemetery family. All right, keep an eye on the web store. The book begins after that intro on February 5th, 1976, after the fact, as the Lutzes were featured on New York Channel 5's 10 o'clock news. The reporter outside revealed that the Lutzes had moved out of the house after 4 weeks and mentioned strange voices seeming to come from within themselves and to a power which, quote, actually lifted Mrs. Lutz off her feet toward a closet, behind which was a room not noted on any blueprints.
Yeah, so this is all feeling very Exorcist.
The reporter then ominously intoned that tragedy and misfortune had befallen every family that had previously owned the house.
Both families. Was there others?
The family before the DeFeos, I believe the house had been, since it was built, passed through relatives, so branches of the same family or distantly related people, until the DeFeos bought it. The DeFeos had lived in it happily for 10 years before the murder happened.
Well, yeah, I don't know how happily.
That's true.
Senior was beaten on everyone.
Yeah. But I don't think they would have been a totally happy family no matter what.
I think you could have put them in a chateau and it wouldn't have ended well.
Exactly right. Channel 5 also that night interviewed William Weber, who you'll remember from last week's episode. He was Ron DeFeo Jr.'s attorney.
Yes.
And it's weird that he would be involved. I mean, I guess not that weird that they would want to talk to him because he represented the guy who did the murder that presumably was maybe causing this haunting, right?
I don't know. You're in news. You know that you try to find anyone with a name related to a story.
Well, that's true, but this is they're obviously pumping up a pretty outlandish angle here as far as news go. But Channel 5 interviewed William Weber, and on this report, Weber said he had commissioned studies hoping to prove that there was some supernatural force influencing the behavior of anyone living in 112 Ocean Avenue. Now, why could William Weber want to prove such a thing?
What studies? Like the Ghostbusters?
Yeah, ostensibly the Ghostbusters. He had reached out to the Psychical Research Institute, and he also said to the news reporter, he said, I'm aware that certain houses could be built or constructed in a certain manner so as to create some sort of, electrical currents through rooms based on the physical structure of the house. So he was suggesting this wasn't a ghostly thing, but there was some kind of a natural phenomenon that made people violent when they lived in this home.
Like ley lines or electromagnetic forces.
Yes, and he was positing that this was also responsible for whatever had been happening to the Lutz family.
It's kind of like that haunted hotel we talked about that thought that maybe because it was made of like a lot of quartz or whatever, it had conducted
Oh, yeah.
electric energy.
That's right.
There's a
And
lot
that was
of water.
bullshit too, right?
Well, to you, there's a lot of water nearby. So that could be something.
I guess there's a lot of water nearby lots of places, though, and they don't have, like, statues flying around the room and stuff.
Yeah, but you never know what a finished basement is going to attract.
2 weeks after that initial news report, the Lutzes held a press conference. From... What do you think would be a place... Where would make sense to have this press conference from?
Well, they, I assume, don't want to go back to the house.
Yep, that's
Could
true.
be in front of the house, if they still technically own it.
They were claiming not to ever want to step foot on the property again at this point, so it couldn't be at the house. No, the Lutzes did their television press conference from William Weber's office.
Ah.
Where they explained to the cameras that the house was being investigated by the Vatican's Council of Miracles, as well as the Psychical Research Institute. Society for Psychical Research. You don't want to get these UFO guys confused because they will come
Well,
after
they're
you.
not UFO guys. So that's an issue.
Oh, it all melts together. These
But yes,
Psychical Research
UFO
Societies
people
do
as
all
well.
of it.
They have their own specific societies, and they're very happy to be called those. Thank you very much.
Yes. So the Lutzes explained that they were bringing in their own parapsychologists to study the matter, and that they weren't going to spend another night in the house or near the property, but that it wasn't on sale yet, pending the end of their investigation. Heavily emphasizing the yet, because they were hoping to make their money back on the house at some point. The press conference ended with the Lutzes apparently saying they were cutting off all contact with the media, and they didn't give any more interviews after that. It wasn't until this book drops, the book proudly informs us, that anyone got the Lutzes' full story. Mm-hmm. So, what was the Lutzes' story? Well, let's talk about them. George Lutz was, in 1975, 28 years old.
Wow, young.
Yes, it's a young family, and they have 5 kids already.
Oh, I think it's a family of 5.
Oh, sorry. You're
But still, that's 3 kids.
They have 3 kids already.
We have 1 dog.
The oldest is 9. So George was 19, and Kathy 21 when they had their first son. George was the 3rd-generation owner, as he would proudly inform anyone who asked, of a family-run land surveying business called William H. Perry Incorporated. So he was doing all right, but this house was a big step up from their last one, apparently about 4 times the value. Mm-hmm. The Lutzes looked at over 50 houses before they could find the one they wanted, and as I said, they were looking to pay between $30,000 and $50,000.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Dollars.
Oh, my God.
But their requirements were they wanted so they were looking to pay between 30 and 50 but the house had to be on the water because George had 2 boats that he wanted to bring with him.
It has to also have a swimming pool.
It didn't have to have a swimming pool, but George needed enough space to have a home office.
Finished basement, baby.
And so they had looked at, they say, over 50 houses and couldn't find anything in their price range that had everything they wanted. Mm-hmm. Well, the book describes 112 Ocean Avenue, and again, here I will once again encourage listeners to, if you have a Google machine handy, just pull up a picture of this house. It's a gorgeous house. If you didn't know what had happened in there, you might want to live in it, and if you do know what has happened there, you definitely want to live in it. It is in the words of Jay Anson here in the book, a big, rambling, 3-story affair with dark shingles and white trim. The weird thing is it's a very narrow and very deep lot, and a very narrow, very deep house.
Yeah, I remember that from driving by it.
So the front door is actually not on the Ocean Avenue side. It's on the, corner street.
Yeah. And don't forget those eye windows.
Yes, it had 2, rounded eye-like windows.
Kind of rounded triangles.
Yes.
It looked like eyes peering out at you.
Near the top of the house. Later owners have renovated that feature out, so...
Yeah.
So the house is a little harder to recognize now, which I think was the idea. Mm-hmm. As they drove up the driveway, the Lutzes passed a small sign from the previous owners of the house proclaiming the property's name, High Hopes. Mm-hmm. If you remember, Mr. DeFeo had given the Ron DeFeo Jr. had given the house that name, then subjected his family to 10 years of terror before being shot unceremoniously in the back while he slept.
Listen, I'm sure the name was still apt. It's not high deeds.
It's not high realities.
Yeah.
The Lutzes were amazed at the asking price, despite it being a little bit over what they were looking to pay. But then they heard it was the DeFeo house, and the sort of price point made more sense. But again, it didn't really bother them, and Kathy is reported in the book as saying to George, "It's the best we've seen. It's got everything we ever wanted."
And more.
And much more than they could ever have hoped for. The family moved in on December 18th. The boys' bedroom was placed on the 3rd floor. And, sorry, I didn't tell you about their kids yet. 3 kids. Daniel's the oldest. Like I said, he's 9 years old. Christopher is 7. And Melissa, also called Missy, is only 5. The boys' bedroom was placed on the 3rd floor. And Missy's furniture was put in a room diagonally opposite her parents' on the 2nd floor. Mm-hmm. The family didn't have any living room furniture from their previous place, nothing they wanted to move in. So they threw in $400 over the asking price, and the DeFeo's furniture was thrown into the bargain, including their beds.
No, I was going to ask. Not
Yeah.
the mattresses, presumably.
The kids had their own beds, but George and Kathy Lutz were reportedly sleeping in the bed that was previously used by Ron DeFeo and his wife, who's Ron and Louise DeFeo.
Listen, you get murdered in a house, whatever, but I'm not going to sleep in someone's murder bed.
Maybe
It's not because of any superstition. That's just like, okay, let's cleanse the energy in here.
It's just gross. I don't even really like secondhand mattresses. A Father Frank Mancuso in the book.
That's an Italian name.
Yes.
That's a Long Island name.
Some of the people in this book, mainly the people who were outside the Lutz family, their names are changed to protect their privacy and possibly make the paper trail harder to follow. And so this Father Frank Mancuso is actually a then Catholic priest named Ralph Pecoraro.
That's an Italian Long Island name.
So they went Italian Long Island to Italian Long Island. This guy's a guy your dad would have been friends with in Pelham.
Absolutely. Probably was.
Pecoraro. But we're going to call him...
A Beckahead.
But we're going to call him what the book calls him. So remember, this guy's actually Ralph Pecoraro, but we're going to go with Frank Mancuso, Father Mancuso, who came to bless the house at the Lutz's request. The book says they had known him for a couple of years at this point. They had been attending his church and knew him pretty well, and he was happy to come over and bless the house. Father Mancuso didn't tell the Lutzes at the time, but would later report that he heard a masculine voice yell, "Get out!" Just as he began to flick holy water in the direction of the house.
My friend Kim said that she heard something similar in my living room once, and my dad wasn't home.
Was it "Get out"?
Yeah, it was Get Out.
That's
And she left.
Well, she listened. Father Mancuso didn't listen immediately. He apparently walks into the house. In the book, he walks into the house from room to room. He says he gets a really bad pressure sensation on his chest as he walks up to the 2nd floor, and especially pausing outside the room that was supposed to become Kathy's sewing room.
Well, that's just the gabagool from lunch.
Hey, I'm feeling a little queasy here.
There's 3 floors. I mean, it's a hike.
Father Mancuso left without incident, but he said that later he found dark circles appearing under his eyes, and a strong force, almost like wind, but there didn't seem to be any wind blowing. Something tried to force his truck off the road and onto the shoulder while he was driving home that day. And then, a few minutes later, the truck's hood and right door, passenger side door, just flew open, and then the truck stalled and died right there on the road. Mancuso said there was nothing that would have caused this. He, opened up the hood and fucked around with the engine for a minute before deciding he didn't know what had happened, and a friend gave him a ride back to the rectory.
So this is not the part where all the flies happen, because I think that's how it is in the movie. Is like right at the beginning, the priest comes to bless the house, and there's all the flies.
No, the flies start showing up later. In the first week of the house, things started up slowly. The family apparently had a pretty idyllic first couple of days before George started being awakened by knocking sounds. And apparently this became a habit for almost every day of the 28 that he lived in the house. George Lutz says that he sat bolt upright in bed, awakened by some kind of noise, or sometimes just for no reason at all, apparently, at 3:15 in the morning.
Oh, the spooky time.
3:15 on the dot, and likely around the time when the murders had been committed.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the time when he wakes up at 3:15, George looks outside and sees shadows flitting across his backyard. And when he charges out to investigate these shadows and sounds, which he does at first, later in the month he doesn't even bother anymore, but when he goes out, he always finds that the boathouse door has mysteriously unlocked itself, and the door will be banging back and forth against the boathouse. This is a pretty constant feature throughout the month that the Lutzes spend in the house. Another constant feature are the personality changes, especially for George, which started subtly at first. Kathy said he was more irritable at home, and also that he stopped showering and shaving. Now, I don't know about you, but more irritable could be just after moving into this brand new house with your wife and kids, and stopping showering and shaving could be because George isn't going to the office anymore. And we all saw what pandemic habits looked like.
Well, stress, maybe, I don't know if it's depression, but certainly anxiety about this new home, which is a little out of their depth. Yeah, I could see that totally starting to happen, being a little irritable, not showering.
George was also constantly chilly in the house, kind of like you.
Kind of like my grandma. I'm not chilly. I like the house chilly.
Yes, sorry. You like the house too chilly. That's what I'm saying. It's like George is living with you here because he's constantly going back and forth to the furnace.
And you don't shave. Oh, no.
He's constantly going back and forth to the furnace and adding more wood. It was a wood-burning thermos. Even with the thermostat at 80 degrees, George is still walking around the house shivering and going downstairs to put more. Kathy said it was during these first couple of weeks in the house, basically all George did was wander around the house shivering and then feeding more wood into the fire. Which, hey, that's working from home, I guess.
I guess you're on the water. It's, December, January.
It is December or January. It's not boat weather yet, and the river was frozen over, but sometimes...
No, but it's colder.
Yes. But sometimes George would just go out to the boathouse and stand there. Kathy would look out...
That's just a dad thing.
Kathy would look out the window and see George just standing there, looking around for 5-10 minutes on end, not doing anything, and then just walking back inside the house.
I'm pretty sure our friend Nick from the Unloaded Questions podcast would say that he just does that in his lawn daily.
Yes, I think you're right.
It's just a homeowner dad thing.
The personality changes seem to have affected Kathy a little bit too. Or at least, in night four that they spent in the house, both parents collaboratively beat all three of their children.
Oh my God.
With a strap and a heavy wooden spoon.
Have they ever done this before?
They say no, but that's what they say. I don't know. The offense, Carrie? The kids had accidentally cracked a pane of glass while they were playing. The kids claimed they hadn't done it, of course.
Jeez. Yeah, it must be convenient to blame a ghost on your abuse.
Mm-hmm. Starting December 22nd, which would be their 5th day of the house, the whole family started catching snatches of sickly sweet perfume smells all around the house. And at the same time, every toilet in the house had filled with stinky black gunk. It's not described as, like, poop. It's like a...
Just a stinky ghost.
Yeah, but there was, like a black mold ring completely filling the inside of every toilet bowl that Kathy couldn't scrub out completely. And it was right here on day 5 that as they went from room to room seeing what else was wrong, Kathy found that one upstairs window was completely covered in hundreds of buzzing flies.
Not the flies.
And that window was Kathy's sewing room, where the priest had gotten such a bad feeling when he had walked up 5 days before. Almost immediately after they discovered the flies, they still don't know what to do about that. George had to scrape them off more or less individually and dump them out the window. And then a guy knocked on the door, about 40 years old, balding, They describe him as red-nosed with the cold outside, although the children had just been playing outside a few hours before. The man had coarse features and a six-pack of beer in his hands. He was wearing...
Is this W.C. Fields?
Yes, it's W.C. Fields with his big red nose. He's wearing a wool coat, corduroy pants, and construction boots. And the Lutzes have already been in the house for almost a week, but the guy's standing there in their doorway saying, "Everybody wants to come over to welcome you to the neighborhood. You don't mind, do you?" And George said, "Oh, no, we don't mind. We don't have furniture yet, guys, but if they don't mind
We just have our murder bed.
If they don't mind sitting on cardboard boxes, you bring them all," George said. And as he did, he tried to accept the six-pack from the man, but the man kind of firmly held onto it.
No. Oh, no. These are mine.
And said to George, "I brought it. I'll take it with me." Then he turned around and left. And they never.
This isn't haunted. This is just stupid.
They never saw him again. That man, Carrie, they say that man was not a neighbor, and he never appeared. What's so funny?
It's just so funny.
This is scary stuff, Carrie.
I think of everything they've experienced. This, like, socially awkward drunk is not the worst.
Carrie, they never saw him again.
They only lived there for another week. Oh, that's so funny.
Well, what's not funny, Caroline?
Poverty.
Well, that's true. That night, after the DeFeos had gone to bed, George was once again awakened by a horrible wrenching sound. He went downstairs to find that a 250-pound wooden front door had been wrenched off of its hinges and was standing there like, slanted against the wall.
And there was a large man outside going, "Can we come in now?"
Nope, the large man was not outside anymore. Again, they never saw him again, Carrie.
Right.
Ghostly presence.
I'm sorry.
There was obviously they couldn't call a repairman at night, so they just shut the door as best they could, went back to bed. The following morning, Kathy noted with, a sense of unease, to say the least, that all three of her children were sleeping on their stomachs. She said they'd never slept that way before. Ominous when you think of the DeFeo family.
Right.
That morning, a locksmith came to fix the broken door, and he said that he was out once for the DeFeo family, who had brought him to fix the lock on the boathouse door, which they said was always swinging free. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not sure if it was while the locksmith was there or after he had left, but Father Mancuso called back again.
Hey,
I've had a terrible fucking flu over here. He said he had had flu-like symptoms that had steadily worsened to like 108-degree fever or something, it says in the book. And he had been sick ever since the day he had visited the DeFeo's house. And he kept having horrible dreams about a second-floor room where he had gotten a bad vibe. Mm-hmm. He described where the room was, and with a chill, George, of course, realized that it was the sewing room where all the flies had been. So he said, "Well, what do you think we should do about this, Father?"
Fuck if I know.
Well, he might have been thinking that, but he didn't have a chance because the call on both ends was interrupted by static, and both men said that they found they couldn't call the other one back after they had hung up the phone.
Ooh.
Now, Carrie, one thing we see in basically every poltergeist situation is a young or pubescent girl in the house.
Yeah, can be a boy sometimes, but yeah.
Usually a girl, though.
Usually a girl.
And we've talked about this in our Bridgeport poltergeist episode. Mm-hmm. Go back and check out the Ghost on Lindley Street, which is a much better book, by the way, than this one.
Shout out to our friend Bill Hall.
Shout out to our friend Bill Hall, master magician, master author, master man.
He's a good guy. He seemed nice.
He's great. He's probably not listening, but we love you, Bill.
Wow. I didn't know your feelings went that deep.
So young girls and young kids in general are great in these kinds of stories because they often provide the creepiest details just by being little kids.
Mother, there's someone at the window.
And so one night, while out checking on the clanging boathouse door once again at 3:15 in the morning, George looked back up toward the house and was certain he saw his daughter, Missy, framed in her bedroom window with a face looming behind her that looked like some kind of an animal. He thought of a pig. George sprinted inside and up the stairs and found his daughter fast asleep in bed away from the window. Obviously, no pig in the room. But later, I think just the following day, when the kids were told, because of A, the flies, and then B, the call from Father Mancuso, when the kids were told that it was time to stay out of the sewing room, we're just not going to go in the sewing room anymore, Missy said, I know why we have to keep out. Jody's in there. They said, what do you mean? Who's Jody? And she said, he's my friend.
He's my friend, Papa.
He's a pig.
You know.
And with that, the Lutzes' blood ran cold.
No.
He's a pig. Which is something we say about our dog every day.
Well, because he snuffles around a lot. But maybe Jody is just very unsanitary. Stinky ghost.
And the creepy Jody comments continued for sure. When they got their first Christmas snow, Kathy found Missy alone in her room. And Missy turned to no one and said, "Isn't the snow beautiful, Jody?" To which Kathy said, "Who are you talking to, Missy? An angel?" Because Missy was obsessed with angels. She was always talking about angels.
Okay.
Missy said, "No, Jody's a pig. He's my friend. Nobody can see him but me."
So is this a pig, like just a regular pig who can talk, or like a pig person?
Unclear.
Pigman.
We never, at least in the book, we never get more out of Missy than
He's a pig.
he's a pig.
Well.
There is a drawing of him in the book, so he looks like a four-legged pig in that one. Certainly.
Okay.
Now, also around this time, Kathy started feeling, she had the most physical manifestations of anyone in the house. And Kathy started right around Christmas time, December 22nd, 23rd. Kathy started feeling, every now and then, warm, comforting arms embrace her from behind.
Okay.
That was the first time. The second time, the arms came in again, but then started to squeeze.
We can't have nice things.
And this culminated in a situation where the arms were holding her totally still. She found she couldn't move, totally paralyzed on the spot, with the feeling like there were hands on her shoulders and hands holding her arms in. So Kathy collapsed into a chair and started crying in her terror when this force finally released her, and then heard her daughter's voice right behind her. "Jody says you shouldn't cry. He says everything will be all right soon."
Fuck off, Missy.
What do you think? That's creepy. That's some creepy kid stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
So what would you do in this situation? I mean, if you're starting to see these kinds of... Do you find these manifestations scary or convincing so far?
Well, here's the thing. If I was actually experiencing all of this...
Mm-hmm. And this has only been in about, a week or just over.
It seems like the vibes are bad.
Uh-huh.
I would probably call in... Oh, God, I don't know what I would do. I would probably try to cleanse the place.
Mm-hmm.
Probably end up just pissing it off. Maybe call in some sort of expert, whether it's another spiritual person or... I don't know, maybe try to get some more history on the house, because obviously we know there were murders, right? But like, where is the pig coming from?
Well, it's so funny you say that, because that's exactly what George Lutz did. The same day that Kathy felt the arms embrace her and Missy, do the Jody says you shouldn't cry thing, George Lutz was in Syosset running some errands. Did I say that right?
Syosset, yeah.
George was in Syosset running some errands. Oh, you would have loved this book, by the way. Massapequa Park is referenced several times.
We went to Syosset. We went to Massapequa.
George looked up old articles on the DeFeo murders. He visited a library and looked up some newspaper articles on microfiche, and then from there headed to the Amityville Historical Society.
Okay, I like this train of action.
Now there, George... As claimed in the book, George found records at the Amityville Historical Society that revealed the Shinnecock Indians had used land on the Amityville River, right in the area where George's house currently stood, as an enclosure for the, quote, sick, mad, and dying. But the place wasn't used as a hallowed burying ground by the Indians because they believed there was some horrible evil living there.
So it's like a Native American asylum?
Yes, exactly. Now, I mean, why would they put their sick and unwell people there if there was like this evil? Like, you won't put your dead there, but you'll put the crazies? I don't know if...
Or maybe it's just a big cycle, you know? That's where the evil comes from.
Yeah, this has been largely rejected. This whole idea has been largely rejected by
I'm sure
Native
there's
historians.
like historians that know.
Yeah.
I've never heard of anything like this in Native American not mythology, history. Obviously, I'm not an expert, but...
Well, they believed it to be infested with demons from within the earth, which is why it couldn't be a consecrated burial ground. Later, the same spot was allegedly used by notorious witch John Ketchum.
Oh.
Grandfather of
The
Ash.
witch was a man.
Yes, very much so. Who had, and this is a quote from Jay Anson, had been forced out of Salem, Massachusetts for practicing witchcraft.
No. Well, I did not come across that name on my very voluminous research. John Ketchum?
Yeah, John Ketchum.
Is this a real person?
There is no reference to him anywhere outside of the Amityville Horror.
Well, if he's notorious, I think there must be something.
Yeah, no, people have looked at various different John. There have been people named John Ketchum. None of them lived in Salem. None of them, none of them were banished from anywhere for witchcraft.
I was thinking maybe it could be just a Long Island guy, but yeah.
And the extant current living Ketchum family has done extensive genealogy to see if there was a witch back in their history, and they haven't been able to find any male or female. But allegedly, this John Ketchum had built his home within 500 feet of where the Lutz house currently stood. And the old witch was buried somewhere on the property.
And it had a finished basement.
No, that's about it. And that brings us to the end of the year as far as haunted happenings go. Well, except for New Year's Eve of 1976, where, as they waited for midnight, as the time burned down on the year, George and Kathy both claim that they saw a hooded, horned demon materialize in the flames of their fireplace.
That's just a champagne, baby.
And then burn away to ash.
Wow.
They went immediately to bed and slept for an hour. Now, how do you go right to bed after that?
Absolutely not.
But after sleeping for an hour, a gust of wind blew every door and window in the house open at once. So they awakened to a giant banging get up, and every door, upstairs, downstairs, every window thrown open.
That's what you get for waterfront living.
The only door that was closed as George stalked around the house was Missy's.
Jody's in here. He likes the door closed.
Well, Missy was fast asleep, so she didn't say anything like that. But when George opened the door, the rocking chair in Missy's room in the corner was creaking slowly back and forth.
It's kind of adorable to think about a little pig sitting in the rocking chair, though.
Here's the best part. The following morning, George woke up thinking, it must have been my imagination, right? He went outside and found giant, cloven-hoofed tracks.
Santa's been here.
In the snow.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Pig's getting around.
So there you go. It's the end of 1975, and there's obviously something very rotten in the town of Amityville, New York.
And the toilets.
And in the toilets, for sure. And we'll get into what 1976 held for the Lutz family after the break.
Bicentennial.
Science, science, science! Science, science! Hello, podcast fans. Want to get weird with us? Come check out the Mad Scientist Podcast. We're a weekly show that looks at the history, philosophy, and hard facts behind your biggest paranormal questions.
Did the government really pay for a psychic spy program?
Yes!
Is it true that surgery got its start in grave robbing?
Yes!
Can a roller coaster really kill you?
Legally, we can't say so for sure, but sometimes, yes! Join myself, Chris Cogswell, and my co-host, Marie Mayhew, as we examine the science, philosophy, and history behind the strange and unusual. All to discover what's possible and plausible versus what's, well, just made up. Check us out wherever you find your favorite podcasts. The Mad Scientist Podcast.
Welcome back. when last we left you, we had gotten the Lutzes through the first, almost half of their stay at 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, New York. What do you think, Carrie? And we still haven't, trust me, we haven't reached the fever pitch of this whole story yet. But what do you think of the Lutzes story so far? Does it ring true? Does it sound scary?
Definitely sounds scary. Mostly I'm just regretting ending the last segment with a coquettish bicentennial.
Well, listen, it was 1976. They were excited. Those quarters were coming out with the little drummer guy on them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Other things probably happening. Fireworks,
Lots of stuff
I bet.
with drummer guys on them.
And as they eased into the new year, the Lutzes were getting increasingly uneasy about their surroundings. On January 4th, George went downstairs to the basement after the compressor in the boathouse suddenly died. He did manage to get it running again, but then he noticed a horrible smell coming from the basement closet, which the real estate agent had informed them had a hidden room behind it that was added by the previous owners.
I do hate a crawl space.
It was the smell of human excrement, and it got stronger and stronger as he got nearer to the secret room, until he got close and vomited on the floor.
Yeah, no one wants a poopy closet.
No, nobody wants a poopy closet. Now, there was this lion statue. I think I mentioned it last week. It fell on Kathy at one point, and then it later seemed to leap up from the floor and bite George on the leg.
Yes.
So they had moved the lion statue into the sewing room and closed the door. We don't go in there anyway. Let's just collect all of the evil shit in the house in one room, right? And we won't have to deal with it. But as George came up, still retching from the smell of human shit in his basement, the lion statue was back on the table, right in the kitchen as he entered from the basement. And George, not knowing what else to do, threw it in the garbage can outside. The Lutzes went to bed as normal that night, but George, that is, was awakened at 3:15 as usual, but this time by drum beats that built into the cacophony of an entire marching band.
It's the bicentennial.
It is. They're celebrating the bicentennial. The marching band doesn't start, Carrie, until our nation is 200 years old. So these are very patriotic ghosts or demons. We know that.
Apparently.
George goes to investigate the marching band. Doesn't find anything. By the time he's downstairs, it sounds like they're upstairs. When he's upstairs, it sounds like they're downstairs, clanging around trumpets and trombones. Probably 76 of them, if I had to guess. When he went back to his bedroom, he found Kathy floating, still unconscious and in her sleeping position, but floating 2 feet off the bed.
That's the Exorcist shit.
2 days later, on the night of January 6th, Kathy repeated the same routine. As George woke up at 3:15, turned and saw his wife once again floating off the bed. George pulled her back down in this case and was shocked to see that she had the face of a 90-year-old toothless woman.
Ooh, The Shining style.
And George reacts to this like he seemed truly a monster. And it makes it clear that he recognizes that it's his wife, just old. Like it says, and he saw Kathy's eyes looking out. And it's like, and he reeled back from the wretched horror before him. It's like,
of old age.
yeah, geez, this is tough, George. She's going to look like that eventually.
Oh, no.
So that was very scary to George. He woke Kathy up, and after she awakened, she didn't look old anymore, but she still had black creased lines down her face, almost as if someone had slashed it, like they were scars. But they said the creases, too, faded after just a few minutes after she woke up. Now it was time to get some extra outside help.
Yeah, you think?
Right? So the following day, January 7th, George's coworker, Eric, I'm putting this in quotes because I'm assuming it's a names changed for privacy thing, or that these people, hear me out, are made up. Eric brought his girlfriend Francine over. Francine claimed to be a psychic and to have been born with a caul over her face. You know, when kids are born with like a skin caul over their face, and it's like, this is a sign.
Of what? We don't know.
Yeah, something. So she claimed to be sensitive. And as she walked around the house, Francine claimed to sense that the house was built on some kind of burial ground. She also felt a whirling, dizzy sensation on the way up the stairs to the second floor. And she stopped in front of the closed sewing room door, looked at the Lutzes, and said, "You've had problems in there."
Absolutely not.
Then she looked suddenly at George Lutz and intoned in a man's voice that often people in your situation will consider having an exorcism, and that's something I would consider here. She didn't remember saying this, and it was only later that George realized he had heard Father Mancuso's voice.
What?
So this pretty little psychic just suddenly goes like, "Hey, you know what I think you should fucking do?
Okay.
You bringing an exorcist in here, ba-boom, ba-bang."
Ba-boom, ba-bang.
Yeah, you know, like people say.
Like Andrew Dice Clay says.
Oh! After the psychic left, the Lutzes discovered the second-floor banister had been wrenched out of its moorings and torn almost completely off the floor. You would love to have time to clean up after something like that, but then family was visiting, and on January 8th, Kathy's brother Jimmy and his wife Carrie came to visit. Carrie woke the whole house screaming around 3:15
We
in the
Carries do that.
morning. It's C-A-R-E-Y, by the way, for a woman, which is interesting. She wakes up almost the whole family because George, it being 3:15, was already wide awake.
He's probably just going nuts from the lack of sleep.
And when they went to Carrie, she said there was a little boy standing at the foot of her bed looking, quote, so sick, and asking her to help him. Now, Jimmy was sleeping right next to her at the time. He doesn't remember this, so he was trying to convince his wife that she was just dreaming. She said, no, it was so real. And he asked me where Missy and Jody were.
Oh, no.
They run to Missy's room, obviously, but Missy was fine. And then George and Kathy immediately took it upon themselves to march around. The word march is used several times. March around to all unoccupied rooms in the house. They left the kids alone, figuring they would bless their rooms tomorrow.
That's the only way you can walk in the bicentennial.
With a crucifix. Carrie. No, let's not invoke the marching band again, please. They march around to all unoccupied rooms with a crucifix, saying the Lord's Prayer. But in the living room, as she began to launch into the prayer for, I imagine, the dozenth time, Kathy was interrupted by a hum that filled the house, then turned into a swell of jumbled voices, and then all the voices joined together finally into one screamed phrase, "Will you stop?"
Yikes.
As long as we're talking about Jimmy and Carrie, too, I should mention Jimmy had previously lost $1,500 at the Lutz house. He stayed with them just the night before their wedding and had like some honeymoon money. And he was like, hey, look at this. And then the envelope was gone the next morning.
At a different
Earlier,
house?
yes. No, this is at the Lutz's house, but earlier.
The Lutzes got married while they were living there?
No, Jimmy and Carrie, sorry.
Oh, okay.
They had stayed with the Lutzes earlier. It was on a day that I skipped over. It wasn't important. But
They stayed twice in a month span? Get out of here.
And while your sister and her husband are being like haunted, like have
In
a little
new house? Like,
a little decency, for Christ's sake.
lay off.
The day after Jimmy and Carrie left, George found a weird green slime oozing from the ceiling above the staircase. It sounds like a bunch of individual like pools of slime above on the ceiling, each dripping down onto the stair below. George said, this is wild, George said it looked like Jell-O, green Jell-O, but had no taste.
He tasted it?
He touched one of the puddles and
No, not after the poopy closet.
licked the tip of his finger.
George.
George and Kathy thought the kids had done it at first and started like screaming at them and getting ready to beat them with the spoon and the strap again. And then they realized they weren't even sure how the kids could have done that, and that there was a lot of weird stuff going on around the house, and wondered why they had gotten so angry. But then it sounds like George basically sat catatonically in an armchair for about 3 hours and then just went
Licking
nuts.
the wall.
And then just went nuts, like stood up and started once again marching around the house. But this time, instead of praying, he was just screaming. Just get out, you bastards, get out! And he continued this for like half an hour.
Jesus.
Opened every window in the house, just screaming. There was a policeman across the street, actually, who saw this.
He was like,
He was like, I don't really want to deal with this. And he recognized the owner of the house, and then it seemed like it quieted down. So he was like, okay.
Long Island cops.
That's right. The next day, January 10th, Kathy awoke covered in angry red welts. All down her belly. They said from just below her breasts to just above her pubic hair.
Okay, Jay Anson.
So George and Kathy's mother, who came over, called in a panic, to come check out this medical condition, said the blisters or welts were painfully hot to the touch. Like the mother touched one and went, "Oh, I burned myself."
Then she licked her finger.
And then she licked her finger. It tastes fine. The welts vanished within the hour after the mother showed up. But later, George sent Danny, one of his sons, up to close the bedroom window in their bedroom, the same bedroom Kathy had awoken with the welts, and the window slammed shut on his hand. They had to rush the kid to the hospital, and the intern on duty, apparently, was amazed to see that Danny's fingers were completely... I don't even know how to picture this, Carrie, but this is what it says in the book. They were flattened completely.
Ugh.
From the cuticle to the second knuckle.
Ugh.
But the bones were not broken.
They were just separated?
Not even separated. Just
gone?
No, not gone. They were just...
Well, it had to be separated or broken, Sean.
That's what I think. But it says that the bones didn't need to be, the bones were not broken, but the hand was flat. So explain that to me. I don't know how it works.
Did they fix it?
Maybe just the skin was, maybe just the flesh part of it was flattened out to the bone, Mm-hmm. They wrapped his hand up and sent him home. He was fine a couple days later.
Okay.
But you can see things are now starting to build to what we can maybe call our fever pitch. On January 11th at 6:30 a.m., George found that he had, after the emergency room and everything, fallen asleep in his chair. And then he was awakened by the rain on his face, because all of the windows in the house were once again open, as well as all of the doors. In fact, some of the window panes had been broken, and some of the doors were broken and smashed off of their hinges. Even a few that had been locked and bolted the night before. By the time the family got up, there was almost an inch of muddy water in the kitchen that now had to be all cleaned up.
Shitty way to wake up.
Yeah, well, and it doesn't get any better. While they're doing this cleanup, Missy insisted on dragging her father upstairs to introduce him to her friend, Jody the pig, who she said wanted to talk to him. Daddy.
Read the room, Missy.
And Missy's going, "No, he's right there. Can't you see him?" And points to the bedroom window. George followed her finger and says that he saw outside a pair of red eyes framed in one of the window panes. And then his wife, taking matters into her own hands, suddenly rushed past him into his view and smashing that pane of glass with one of Missy's play chairs. Like she picks it up and just...
Like freaking
full barbarian.
Lucha
Yes.
Underground.
Yes, very Lucha Underground. We want tables. The Lutzes both heard a pig's squeal of pain, and the eyes vanished. Now, this has been a lot of talk about Jody, and it's starting to get pretty sinister, so the next day, Kathy finally, and you'd think you would have done this before, finally asked Missy more about her imaginary friend.
Yeah, you ask about it.
She said, well, what does he say when he talks to you? And Missy replied, "He tells me about the little boy who used to live in my room. He died, Mama. The little boy got sick, and he died." And she said, "I see. What else did he tell you?" And this is my favorite. Missy said, "Last night, he said I was going to live here forever, so I could play with that little boy."
Absolutely not.
You're noping right out of there, right?
No. Yeah, that's beyond the pale.
Well, the Lutzes kind of thought the same thing. This was kind of a last straw moment for them. And on January 13th, they tried to leave. George got everybody in the car, loaded up some bags, left most of their stuff behind, and the engine failed to turn over in the driveway. Just no sparks at all. Or it failed to turn over, so...
Call a cab. This is not the middle of nowhere.
Oh, it's even more than that. George gets out of the... Yeah, you're right. It's a small town of about 10,000. It is not the country.
Yeah.
George gets out of the car and goes to open the hood, and then a torrential downpour of rain starts on his head, almost Charlie Brown style.
Only on him?
No, on the whole house in town. But now it was storming, and so George dejectedly got the family out of the car and back into the house. And they just stayed. But I don't see, if you really want to get out, I don't know how the rainstorm...
Call a cab.
Call a cab?
It's like it's not a busy street, but it's like a normal suburban neighborhood. It's not... These houses are right next to each other. Like, it's not the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So weird.
That night, there was a little bit of weirdness. I mean, Kathy did some sleepwalking around their room. And then the dog, they have a dog, in all this. Harry, I think he was like a German Shepherd mix or some big dog. Harry was throwing up after Kathy was sleepwalking around. Then George was cleaning up the vomit, and he threw up. None of this seems supernatural.
He seems like a sensitive stomach kind of guy.
He just seems sensitive in general, in some ways. Anyway, he cleans up all this vomit. He's not having a great night. His wife was catatonic he couldn't wake her up after the sleepwalking thing, so he's feeling weird. But he climbed back into bed, and then as he was laying there, George heard a heavy sliding sound, wood on wood, from above him. And as he sat there listening, George realized he was listening to his son's beds sliding around the floor of their room upstairs. He tried to get up and bolt up there to see what was wrong with his kids or what was happening to his sons, but he found he was totally paralyzed in bed. Couldn't get up, couldn't sit up, couldn't move. Then the dresser drawers in George and Kathy's room started opening and closing on their own and keeping kind of a beat. And where there's a beat, Carrie, that's right, the marching band joined back in. And so here's George.
They can't resist.
So here's George. He's pinned down in bed. He can't move. He hears his son's beds just whipping around upstairs like the Indy 500 or something. And down here, all of the drawers are now...
This is hell.
It is. And then George says, I must have passed out from the panic and the terror of what was happening, because then I was suddenly woken up. The next thing I know, I'm woken up by my son tugging at my arm. Mm-hmm. So George wakes up in bed with the son tugging on his arm and telling him that there was a faceless monster in their room hanging over their beds.
George is at his last straw. He's over it.
He actually truly is at this point, because George finally summons the strength to push off of his bed, steps into the hall, looks to his left, and sees at the top of the third floor landing a figure in a white hood.
No.
He couldn't see its face, but as he watched, the figure extended a hand and one finger and pointed at George Lutz. Rushing back into the bedroom, Kathy was still asleep or catatonic, one or the other. So we have George carrying Kathy. He lifts her up off the bed, carries her to the van outside while he yells for the boys to go and get Missy. The whole family gets in the van, the engine turns over right away, and they all just get the hell out of Dodge. And so ended the Lutzes' stay at 112 Ocean Avenue, 28 days after they had initially moved in.
I always thought it ended with, like, George trying to kill everyone.
No, that's from the movies.
Oh.
That night, the Lutzes went and stayed with Jimmy and Carrie. It's only right
yeah.
they repay the favor at this point. But that night, George and Kathy claimed that they were both levitated out of bed in their sleep. First, George and Kathy saw it happen. Then they went back to sleep, and George saw it happen to Kathy.
God, it's like a post-credits sequence.
They said, we got to get out of this house too, obviously. But when they left the room, they saw a trail of green-black slime coming up the stairs at them.
Swamp Thing.
Swamp Thing! It was clear that whatever evil the Lutzes had found at 112 Ocean Avenue, it did follow them as far as Jimmy and Carrie's house. The family moved to California within the next couple of weeks, and the frightening incidents did not follow them out there. They were finally free of the terror. But not everything was over at the house in Amityville. And as previously mentioned, Ed and Lorraine Warren got themselves involved in this. After the aforementioned New York Channel 5 News arranged an investigation and 3 seances over the course of a night. Lorraine Warren, let's treat this as an introduction to the Warrens, although we've mentioned them plenty of times on the podcast before. Lorraine claimed to be a sensitive clairvoyant, and her husband, Ed, was a self-proclaimed, self-taught demonologist. Also present in this particular investigation were George Kikoris from the Psychical Research Institute and Mary Pascarella and Alberta Riley, who were both psychics. Obviously self-proclaimed. During one of the seances, the first seance of the night, Mrs. Pascarella became ill and had to leave the room. And she seems to disappear from the rest of the investigation. So she became very ill. And she said, As she was having kind of a fainting fit, she said, "In back of everything, there seems to be some kind of a black shadow that forms a head, and it moves. And as it moves, I feel personally threatened." During the same seance, Mrs. Riley, in a gasping trance, said, "It's upstairs, in the bedroom. What's here? It makes your heart speed up. My heart is pounding." Ed Warren started to get concerned, as he often did in these situations. You know, his wife would start having, like, problematic symptoms or some kind of a fit, and Ed would go, "We need to stop this. It's dangerous."
Yeah, we see that in The Conjuring,
Yeah,
1
so
and 2.
It's like one of his trademark moves. So,
Well, when it's Patrick Wilson, it's very romantic.
yeah, sure.
But, you know.
But my point, they have to reach into the bag of tricks. You know, they have a show they have to put on. The Warrens do, and so
In your opinion.
and so he pulls out the "We gotta stop. We have to put an end to this." As George Kikoris got violently ill, that's a quote unquote, and had to leave the table. Violently ill implies to me, yeah. Which let's end this seance at that point. Once
Yeah.
the table's covered in bile.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, Lorraine said, "Whatever is here is, in my estimation, most definitely of a negative nature. It has nothing to do with anyone who once walked the earth in human form. It is right from the bowels of the earth." The investigation was pretty brief. I mean, after that, it was kind of time to sell the house and stuff. So it was really, as far as I can tell, just that one night. But afterward, Ed and Lorraine gave numerous interviews, and the whole thing was a pretty nice publicity boost for their New England Society for Psychic Research, which they had started all the way back, I think, in the 50s. First psychic research society in New England.
So that's cool.
Yeah. Now, at this point, Ed and Lorraine had already participated in the investigations that would spawn the Annabelle and Conjuring movies. But it was this investigation that really kind of got them to national media attention. And obviously, because this book was such a big seller, this is what got Ed and Lorraine's names into the most people's hands. At a junket for the Conjuring movie, the first Conjuring movie in 2013, Lorraine Warren was asked by one reporter to compare that case, the one The Conjuring is based on, which was in England, right?
Yeah. The Conjuring 2?
Oh, no, The Conjuring.
That one was Rhode Island,
Yes.
near the Connecticut border, I think.
Lorraine was asked to compare that case with the Amityville one, which one is scarier, you know? Mm-hmm. And she said it was no contest. "Amityville was horrible, honey. It was absolutely horrible. It followed us right straight across the country. I don't even like to think about it. I will never go in the Amityville house ever again. You don't know how long my career is. That's the only one."
Well, I mean, they do reference it in the Conjuring movie of like this kind of specter of an event that happened beforehand, and he's really worried about her and all that stuff.
Well, in that movie, it feels like something they have to reference because any audience member going in who knows the names Ed and Lorraine Warren only know it from the Amityville story, probably.
Most people, yeah.
Okay, so what is going on in this house, Carrie?
I don't know.
Anson concludes in the book that there are at least 3 distinct entities residing in the house. Francine the medium detected at least 2 ghosts. And by ghosts here, we mean like the ex-person kind of ghost.
Yes.
There was the little boy that both Missy and Carrie had mentioned seeing. Missy didn't see the boy, but he was mentioned to her that she would be playing with him. So that would be one of the ghosts. And then, I don't know, maybe that neighbor with the 6-pack of beer could be the other ghost.
He's just a random Long Island local.
Well, Francine had also detected an elderly female presence in the house. But the hooded figure, seen by George and Kathy in the fireplace, and later seen by George at the top of the stairs, it's been suggested that is some kind of inherently evil or malevolent entity, a demon, if you will. The theory, as it goes in the Amityville horror book, is that this evil could have been invited in by previous occult rituals performed on the site, either in its possible history as a Native American asylum, or in its possible use by a Salem witch who probably didn't exist.
What about Jody the pig?
Oh, I think that is another face of the hooded demon figure.
Interesting. He really went with pig on that one.
Well, once you introduce yourself to the child as a pig, I think you have to keep playing that card. Now the kid wants to see the pig.
Yeah, but making the jump to pig is interesting.
Before we really put any final conclusions on this, Carrie, I think it's really important to discuss the process and history of this book a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm wondering how he got his hands on this story.
Yeah, because this was written, as we said, by Jay Anson. It was published by Prentice Hall. And Anson didn't work directly with the Lutzes. I think he met them at some point before he started work on the book, but he didn't do interviews with them. Instead, the Lutzes gave him 45 hours of tape-recorded recollections by both George and Kathy.
But where did they make the leap to, we're doing a book about this?
Well,
We don't want to do any press about this, but now we're doing a book.
funny enough, Caroline, that all comes back to William Weber, the attorney for Ron DeFeo Jr. Weber says that he's the one who first brought the idea of a book to the Lutz family. He was representing a small company at that point, formed for the purposes of this book, Hoffman, Weber, Burton, and Mars Corporation, where author Paul Hoffman was supposed to write the book and take 40% of the profits. And then Weber, Burton, Mars, and each of the Lutzes would take Kathy and George, the kids don't get their own cuts. Each of the Lutzes would get 12%.
Will Jody get a cut?
So that's 24 for the family. That book deal was sent to the Lutzes in March of 1976. So actually not that long after they moved out of this house.
Oh, that's very soon after.
About a month after that, less than a month after the press conference they gave from Weber's office. But they eventually signed the deal with Anson and Prentice Hall instead, because that book deal gave them 50% of the profits collectively, the Lutzes.
Good business decision.
Great business decision. But the other corporation that had been courting them felt a little bit miffed at their kind of last-minute abandonment of the deal and tried to make whatever hay they could with it. Paul Hoffman did publish 2 articles, more or less identical to each other, from the research he had already done with the Lutzes. And one is called Life in a Haunted House, and it was published in the New York Sunday News, July 18th, 1976. The following year, in Good Housekeeping, in the April issue.
Man, I miss the days when just these bonkers-ass articles would be in ladies' magazines.
Our Dream House Was Haunted was the title.
Crazy.
Hoffman and Weber claim that they brainstormed the ideas present in those articles and in the Amityville Horror book with the Lutzes over the course of several meetings in 1976.
Weber's like, throw in a marching band, throw in a pig, whatever.
What's that, Carrie? You what reason do you have to believe William Weber? Why would you, and Paul Hoffman, right? They could just be lying. We would need this to be dragged into a court of law to get any kind of... Well, in May 1977, George and Kathy Lutz decided to sue Hoffman, Weber, Burton, Mars, Good Housekeeping, and the New York Sunday News, and the Hearst Corporation, which owned, I don't know, at least one of those magazines, probably both, for $4.5 million. That would be $21.2 million today. And
Chunk of change.
And this was for using George and Kathy's names in the article that he wrote and invading their privacy by using the research without permission. For their part, Hoffman, Weber, and Burton each countersued for $2 million apiece, claiming that the Lutzes had perpetrated a fraud and breached their contract. The court felt this way about it. On September 10th, 1979, the Lutzes suit was dismissed, but the 3 counterclaims were allowed to continue and were later settled for an undisclosed sum. Judge Jack B. Weinstein said, "Based on what I have heard, it appears to me that to a large extent, the book is a work of fiction, relying in large part on the suggestions of Mr. Weber." That same week, in an interview with People magazine, Weber said that, quote, "I know this book is a hoax. We created this horror story over many bottles of wine."
Yeah.
Some documents from this court case have been unsealed by later requests of involved, actually, family of Ron DeFeo, oddly enough, who are looking for a little closure. The unsealed document is the testimony of one Father Ralph Pecoraro, dramatized as Frank Mancuso in the book, who testified during this lawsuit that the accounts taking place in the book never happened.
Damn, Father.
In fact, Father Pecoraro, a.k.a. Mancuso, hadn't known the family for years, met them for the first time on the day that he showed up to bless their house, and never entered the house at all.
Well, that's not very good blessing, is it, Father? You gotta at least cross the threshold.
That is
Throw
true.
some holy water on the floor, you know?
But in some accounts, I have heard him say that he thinks he heard "Get Out" when he was blessing the house. So that may explain why he didn't go inside, and it also is one thing that I'm not totally sure that he heard. That it's you would see if you look up all his different quotes
It's
on
foggy.
it. He's gone back and forth about whether that part actually happened. But largely, Carrie, this is a book that features a child's pencil drawing of a pig, apparently running through snow, as evidence. There's no photos in this book, but this picture...
No, this is actually George's drawing.
This picture by Missy takes up a full page toward the end of the book.
Wow. Well, Missy is destined to not be an artist.
Yeah. So what about future occupants, though? The house was purchased by Jim and Barbara Cromartie in 1977. The Cromarties never found any supernatural phenomena in the decade they lived in the house.
No poopy closet?
No poopy closet, but they were plagued by tourists
Yes.
to the point that they eventually changed the address of the house to something I won't share right now. And as we mentioned, the famous eye-shaped windows would be made square by the next owner after the Cromarties. But the Cromarties were not happy about that. I guess there were just like droves of looky-loos on
To this day.
their property every day.
I mean, I've done it. You're not really supposed to like get out and walk around and stuff, but you go to school 20 minutes away. You gotta drive by the Amityville Horror House.
Well, eventually, the Cromarties held a public press conference, just to debunk the claims of the Amityville Horror book
Leave
and
us
movie.
alone.
Yes, and sued the Lutz family and Jay Anson and the publisher for fraud and for invasion of privacy. You're making a face like you don't think that lawsuit has merit.
They moved in knowing that this was in the pipeline.
I actually completely agree with you.
I don't think that holds water.
Well, they did reach some kind of undisclosed settlement, so the Cromarties did get paid off it. Do you want to hear part of their press conference?
Sure.
Sure. So, Barbara Cromartie said, in part, "The quiet village of Amityville, Long Island has been made..." No, that's like a Boston Kennedy thing I'm doing. "The quiet village of Amityville, Long Island has been made infamous..." Do you want to read it, actually? You Long Island this up.
The quiet village of Amityville, Long Island has been made infamous by a hoax. It will possibly never be the same. It is Long Island's equivalent to Watergate. None of us would be here today if a responsible publisher and author had not given credibility to two liars and allowed them the privilege of putting the word true on a book in which, in all actuality, is a novel. The credibility of the hoax stems from using a charlatan Catholic priest who has been banned from performing his religious duties by the Diocese of Rockville Center, the equivalent of a disbarment by a lawyer. This charlatan priest has been involved with complicity to lie and therefore deserves no credibility and should be dealt with accordingly.
The great Marissa Tomei, circa 1992, everybody.
My biological clock is ticking.
Like this! George and Kathy would eventually divorce in 1980. Kathy passed from emphysema in 2004, George of heart disease in 2006, and of course, Ron DeFeo Jr., the guy who kicked all this off by killing his whole family, died in 2021. So, there's not too many people left who were around and cognizant as of this story. The kids, by the way, the Lutz kids, have never wanted to discuss this at all.
I've never seen anything with them giving interviews or anything like that.
I saw one interview with one of the sons, I think it was Matt, where he says, like, he is pretty sure something happened in the house, but he thinks it was all exaggerated quite a bit. The daughter seems traumatized by the whole ordeal or puts on that affectation and has never given an interview. One more little bit of legal involvement for George Lutz, though. In 2005, he did, as I mentioned, file a libel suit against the producers of the Amityville Horror remake. Because in that version, Carrie, the George Lutz stand-in character, they changed his name to something, but the guy who's supposed to be the George Lutz of it all.
The Ryan Reynolds.
The Ryan Reynolds.
The shirtless Ryan Reynolds.
Shirtless Ryan Reynolds goes crazy and tries to kill his family, fires a gun at his wife and kids.
Now, that kind of thing didn't happen in the movie? Like the first one, I mean. The
I haven't seen it in a very long time.
Because, I mean...
But the Lutzes were involved. The Lutzes were fine with the production of that one. And I know George sued the producers of the remake.
Better put that shirt back on, Ryan, or you're going to lose it.
You know what? Maybe that was it. Maybe he was suing the producers for making him gay.
Ryan Reynolds isn't gay.
No. For making George gay when he watched Ryan Reynolds in the movie.
He's cut in that movie, like, unnecessarily. Like, this is a horror movie where you're playing a dad.
He's still Ryan Reynolds. He's never got a flat stomach.
This is pre-Deadpool. This is pre all that. So it just seemed very unnecessary. It's like, this is Van Wilder?
Yeah, but in Two Guys in a Pizza... What is it? Two Girls, a Guy in a Pizza Place?
He's not cut in that.
He looks like he's ready to be an assassin in that one.
Yeah, an assassin of your heart.
Ugh, Christ.
No news this week, friends. There's been plenty of news going around. And us talking about like a baby woolly mammoth's bones being found or whatever.
Cloned Elvis.
It's not really gonna uplift very much. So we're just giving you a little news pause. Enjoy a lack of news once.
Enjoy your news pause.
Enjoy no news.
Hey, Carrie, how about remember the Lindley Street poltergeist story?
Very well.
Isn't it amazing how this book and this story is just a worse, less scary version of that?
Yeah, well, that's the one paranormal story I think that is really, really stuck in your craw, really made you think and consider.
Yeah, while I was reading that book, I was pretty ready to believe in telekinesis. At least only for pubescent girls.
Listen, my name's Carrie, all right? I get it. Yeah, I mean, you'd think that there's more to it because it's so famous and there's a zillion films based on it, and it's such a, like, the Amityville Horror. You can't think of Amityville, New York without thinking Amityville Horror. Even if you've never seen the movie, you can't. It's like Luke, I Am Your Father. It's like ingrained in the public consciousness.
Right. And that book had so much corroboration and was so well organized at the end. And had
The Lindley Street.
Yes.
The World's Most Haunted House by Bill Hall,
Yes.
our aforementioned pal.
Yeah. Maybe we'll see him at Paracon. Speaking of which, we should mention that we're going to be returning to Connecticut's first paranormal convention.
Yes. So we were there last July and it was a blast, and so many people showed up, more than we had ever anticipated. So come on back this time. We're going to be in Ansonia, Connecticut at the...
Ansonia Armory.
Ansonia Armory. There you go.
The abandoned and potentially haunted Ansonia Armory.
And this will be Saturday and Sunday, July 16th and 17th. We'll be there all day. We'll have a table there. We have some little bits of merch. I don't think we're going to have anything big, but we'll have stickers and stuff. And just come on by, talk about your favorite episodes, talk about what you want us to cover. Just tell us you listen, because that'll be nice.
Oh, it'll make us feel great. Last year we saw thousands of people over those couple of days.
Yeah, we heard a lot of great stories. I bought a lot of things for the house.
I bought a remember that really expensive 2-disc Thing soundtrack vinyl that I bought?
Yeah, there's going to be some great vendors there. And, I'll probably try and reach out to some of them beforehand just to get, a few names on the board. But last year I got like a wet specimen little octopus in a jar, which was very adorable. I got some really cool stained glass. There's Weirdo Wonderland has a stall there, which is a great shop in Milford, Connecticut, right near our friends at Static Era. And they sell everything. I mean, I could stay in there. It's a small shop. I could stay in there for hours. They sell everything cool.
Oh, and if you're into tarot, palm reading, any of that stuff, there's a ton of
psychics will be there. Other merch. There's t-shirts. There's posters. Anything horror you can find there.
Yep, and we'll be there with stickers and possibly t-shirts.
I just said.
Well, I know there will be t-shirts there, but from us. Did you say there would be t-shirts from us?
Listen, let's see how the stickers go. And we'll be right with father of the pod, Paul Ferrante, yet again, probably set up right next to him so you can go talk to him about his books. Bill Hall's going to be there. He's going to have his books on the Lindley Street.
Again, if you want to read the Amityville Horror, just skip it and read the Lindley Street. Something might have actually happened.
Yeah, like if it's gotten Sean to go, maybe, then it's a good book. And then there's also going to be the amazing Kreskin, who's like a mentalist. He was on Johnny Carson and stuff, right?
I'm looking forward to that.
So you're excited for that. So yeah, come and visit us July 16th and 17th, Ansonia Armory, Ansonia, Connecticut. We'll be happy to see you.
It was so much fun last year, and this year it's just going to be bigger and better.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And that's it for this episode of Ain't It Scary with Sean and Carrie. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Ain't It Scary, and check out our website at ain'titscary.com. You can support the show by supporting our sponsors and becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/ain'titscary. And please subscribe to the show and throw us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and also now on Spotify. We'll be forever grateful.
We sure will. And special thanks to our beloved top-tier patrons and everyone else joining us over on Patreon. But I want to specially and personally thank, and you know I love all of these people, Nate Curtis, Sean O'Donnell, Jared Chamberlain, Maria Ferrante, Robin McCabe, Comfy Mike, Alex Nakutis, Ryan Regan, Christy Atchison, and Ira.
See you next Thursday.
Show created by Sean and Carrie McCabe, music by Kyle Ryan, and you can find Kyle at his YouTube channel, Music is a Verb.
Ain't It Scary has been brought to you by Killer Podcasts and is a production of Longboy Media.
Science, science, science! Science, science! Hello, podcast fans. Want to get weird with us? Come check out the Mad Scientist Podcast. We're a weekly show that looks at the history, philosophy, and hard facts behind your biggest paranormal questions.
Did the government really pay for a psychic spy program?
Yes!
Is it true that surgery got its start in grave robbing?
Yes!
Can a roller coaster really kill you?
Legally, we can't say so for sure, but sometimes, yes! Join myself, Chris Cogswell, and my co-host, Marie Mayhew, as we examine the science, philosophy, and history behind the strange and unusual. All to discover what's possible and plausible versus what's, well, just made up. Check us out wherever you find your favorite podcasts. The Mad Scientist Podcast.